information between then. But roughly we'll give it maybe 40 minutes or so that I'll be presenting. If you have any questions, there's a Q&A portion at the bottom. If anything comes in your head and you would like to just write it down just so you don't forget it, that's totally fine. But I will wait till the end to answer that portion, okay? All right. So my name is Lukas DeCandido. I'm a therapist here at MedPsych Associates. Just to give you a little bit of a background about MedPsych, we provide best possible comprehensive care by collaborating as a team here. Our diverse and dynamic team of professionals has years of expertise working with children, adolescents, and adults in various environments, such as schools, clinical practices, corporate environments, and teaching hospitals. Some of our team include psychiatrists and physician assistants, psychologists, therapists, ADHD coaches, and more. And some of what we offer includes an autism diagnostic center, individual therapy, group therapy, psychiatry evaluations and medication management. And of course, we have begun doing webinars as well, which is something we're very passionate about. So a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm a licensed associate counselor. I've been a Bergen County resident my whole life. I've actually been a resident of Park Ridge my whole life. I attended Fairleigh Dickinson University for undergraduate studies, and then I continued my academic career at Nyack College Graduate School. While in high school, as a three-sport athlete, I played football, basketball, and baseball. Football and baseball tended to be the sports I like to focus on. Basketball definitely kept me in shape, though. You know, when I was playing that, I think it was something I really appreciated about that. But as I moved on to college, I said, hey, I really want to focus and lock in on one of those sports, and it happened to be football. I think I got the size for it. It kind of makes sense when you see me. But I did attend Fairleigh Dickinson and join the football team as well. You know, I'd like to just continue on a little bit about my journey. I think it's something that's important to share, right? I don't want to just be a webinar host and share this information, but I want you to be able to understand me and why I'm passionate about this. I think when I got into this field, my passion was to be a voice for athletes. You know, I think I kind of encompass what all spectrums of being an athlete. I've been on losing teams where we never won a game. I've been on teams where we went undefeated. I've won championships. I've fallen short and lost championships. I've battled many injuries. I actually retired early from sports because of those injuries. So I've seen a lot of it. It's been something that's been a part of my life since as far as I can remember. Flag football, indoor, soccer. It's really been a piece of me. And so I realized once I was done with organized sports, it didn't end there. There was another aspect to being an athlete, and that was mental health. I think there's so much that comes with it. I really respect all sports and games because I think it shaped me into the individual I am today. But it's not to say that there isn't, our own hardships, our own struggles, our own trials, right? Tribulations. But this is something that definitely is important to me. And you're here. I'll share a little bit more about myself and my journey as we go through this process. Some of the unique struggles I think student athletes face is social pressures, especially in today's day and age. Judgment, not only from others, but from yourself. I think there's a lot of criticism that we put on ourselves as athletes. There's a busy schedule and time demand that comes with playing sports. There's injury, retiring early because of those injuries. I think a lot of our identity is wrapped up in what we do, what sports we play, right? Because of how much we're giving, right? How much energy we're putting into that. And due to that, I believe there's also a little bit of performance anxiety as well that comes along with those things. And this is not everybody, right? Not everybody will experience these things, but I'm speaking to the athlete that may experience those. The first topic is social pressures, right? Athletes are viewed under the lens of a microscope these days, right? Any fan, peer, or coach can see your success, your shortcomings, right? It's all documented, right? Whether it's on video, whether it's written in an article, right? Your name, right? Videos of you and your game are put out there. So it's very easy to access that, right? With the current standings of social media, there's an increased ability to view, right? We can share, right? Say you have a 15-second clip of, maybe a play from your team. or we've all seen other teams, right? We've seen highlights. It can be shared in a matter of seconds, right? To, thousands, millions of people, right? All, people viewing from behind the comfort of a screen. Any given moment, you could also find yourself on ESPN, right? Not top 10. I think we've all seen that. And if you're lucky, right, you get a picture of yourself on the front page of your newspaper, right? But it goes to show there's so many, different ends of the spectrum, right? Your successes, right, of course, will be documented, but that other part, right, that isn't so pretty, right, the failing, right, the falling short, is also there as well. I think that's sometimes hard to grasp as an athlete, right? You have to battle with that yourself, but then there's also the judgment of others, which leads me into my next topic. According to the American College of Sports Medicine, approximately 30% of women and 25% of men who are student athletes report having anxiety, and only 10% of college athletes with no mental health conditions seek care from a mental health professional. As an athlete, there's this stigma, right? I think that we're strong, right? With being strong kind of comes this persona that we build up this wall, right? Nobody can affect me. I'm a warrior, right? I don't really show my emotions. If I show my emotions, that's a little bit weak, right? These are just some of the pressures we experience. I experienced it myself, right? This do-it-yourself mindset. Being a perfectionist. We're very much critics of ourselves, and not only that, I think we receive the criticism of others, right, at their disposal as well. Right. I think we've all been there where we've seen professional athletes, and maybe we're even guilty of it, right? Where we go and we critique, these professional athletes online, right? College athletes. I've seen people even do it to high school athletes and so on. We live in a world where the judgment's out there, right? We can't really hide from that, but I think from within, building up the confidence, right, to work past that, work through that is something that takes time, it takes effort, but getting past that persona, getting past that wall we build up, and breaking through that and allowing yourself to be you while you play is very important. Another thing that's very important and I think doesn't get enough awareness is the amount of time athletes need to practice, to train, right? And that becomes kind of conflicting with our schedules. I can think to myself being a kid and having to reject all these plans, right? I had trainings. I used to take pitching lessons that were half an hour away and they took an hour. And if I was going with my brothers, I was there a couple hours at that night. So time spent away from friends, right? Having to reject those plans. I wasn't on the video games as much, right? And as you can see here, I tried to on the right to kind of paint maybe a picture of what a high school athlete schedule might look like. You're waking up at 6:30, right? You kind of get yourself together, right? Maybe you brush your teeth, right? Go through that, and then eat your breakfast, right? Next it comes up, you're on your way to school, right? We know school takes up a large portion of that day, generally running from 7:30 to 2:45. Right after that for football practice, I think we were on that field no later than 3:15, and I don't remember coming home when it was bright out. So I know it was at least 6 p.m. Roughly that I would maybe kind of wrap up, and I'd be on my way home to have dinner. And at 7 p.m., I'd have to take a bath, right? I was dirty. I'd sweat a lot. And then I had to figure out, hey, wait, hold on. I had a lot of stuff from school today. What do I need to get done for tomorrow? And 7:30 rolls around, you check your planner, right? Do your homework, maybe an hour later, finish up. And then from 8:30 to 9:30, that's your time maybe to kind of catching up on those things you kind of forgot about for a little while, right? Maybe talking to friends, playing a game, listening to music, watching the show, catching up with your family a little bit. I think it's so important to recognize as athletes that we need to find balance, right? We're more, as athletes, we're more prone to have a busier schedule because of those things. But you can't let go of those other things that you enjoy, right? With balance, you decrease that risk of burnout, right? We're hanging out with friends, we're talking with friends still. You plan for your weekends. I always say as an athlete, your weekends, it's like summer vacation, right? You need to plan that out. You can't let it come and go because that's our time to refill our battery, right? So we need to work on building up a better schedule, right? Being self-aware, right? That, hey, I need to slow things down. I need to see this friend. I need to go, for a walk in that park I haven't been to in a long time. It's all stuff that kind of helps us stay on the field too, right? If you take away a little bit too much of that, then all of a sudden you start blaming your sport, right? I think, then the first thing we'd say is, what can I get rid of? And you see, it's 3:15 to 6:30. That's a whole 3 hours right there, right? But sports is too much. We have too much fun and we love it, right? So we have to find a way to remain balanced. And like I said, not rejecting plans. Sometimes you worry a little bit about, and it has a little bit of impact on your friendships. Um, and I think for this, I go back to college and I kind of remember that first week of camp, and it was a lot. It was something like I never experienced before. And as school started for college, I remember having practice. I remember having meetings at Lyft, individual meetings. On top of that, all my classes. I had to find time to eat, and I really thank my coaches then, because they really taught me how to schedule. I had it down to 15 to 30 minutes what I was doing, because one of the things I knew I needed to do each day was call home, right? I needed to see how everybody was doing. I needed to talk to mom. That kept me grounded. That kept me feeling good. So I really appreciate my coaches then, teaching me how to schedule and be efficient. It's been super important to me to this day, and I like spreading that knowledge. Next topic is a little bit about injury. Though anybody can suffer injury, I think there's an element to athletes that's unique. As athletes, it's physical what you're doing. It's very, very much so physical. When you do get injured, I think there's a fear of losing your position or your job on the team. Time continues to move on, right? There needs to be a next man up kind of policy when it comes to that, which is, I think, amazing as a team, right? But there is an element to that when you do get injured that you're missing out a little bit, right? It's something that you were doing. It's your sport, is your job on that team. It's something you take pride in. And to see that and let that go is not always easy. So, and it could take, when you have injuries, you don't factor in that it could take weeks or months with physical therapy and recovery as well, right? It's a long period of time where you're spending now trying to get better, right? To get yourself out there. There's also trauma related to injury, right? I think this kind of goes back to the social element. How many times do we see, if you log onto social media when there's a big game going on, I think, at least once a game, somebody's going to post an injury from the game, right? And that's sometimes the worst moment for people, right? To view their own injury, right? Seeing what it was, what happened, right? Then all of a sudden you're supposed to get better and get on that field. I think for myself, I can remember when I hurt my knee very badly in college. I had torn my MCL meniscus, and it was filmed because we were filming the game, of course. One of the things you do for football is you learn from the film, right? You watch your play. And I remember viewing that, and I remember it kind of giving me this really, butterfly in the stomach feeling. And the next time I stepped foot in that field, I was so worried about that knee and that same thing happening, that I became so kind of locked in on this idea of, focusing on not getting hurt again, that it took away from my ability on that field for at least a little while. And also the fear of, like I just said, not returning to peak performance level, right? Returning from injury, will I ever be the same, right? I think with modern, with physical therapy, and great doctors, we do get back to that performance level, but it's not always the case. And so I think there's a lot of time also worried about that. And then, of course, time spent away from the team, right? Your team is your family, right? That's what I like to think. Those are your brothers, the people that you go to work with, right, on that field, and being away from that in an environments, right, that's something you really appreciate. I think that's why some people, most people love their sport, is because of that aspect. So another aspect then is early retirement and medical retirement from the sport. An individual who has retired early due to injury or illness can struggle with their post-retirement identity. Those who retire must find additional hobbies and interests to remain balanced. Their schedule often changes dramatically. Um, this holds very true to myself as well. Um, I can remember being, I believe it was my junior year at Fairleigh Dickinson, and I was going into the football season, and I had suffered a few concussions before, and I had kind of dual injuries at the time, and I had decided, and with my lovely trainers at that point, decided that it was probably best for me to step away from the game. And I kind of struggled with that decision. It wasn't easy. I remember spending some time with my family. It's something I really wasn't sure of. I wanted to be 100% certain about it. And I got myself to that point. And, but it was not an easy decision. And this is one of the turning points when I realized that mental health is in so many ways, but this way, a very crucial um, aspects as an athlete as well, is that one day, right, we might not all go pro, right, and eventually have to retire or retire from injury. And that's not always the easiest thing to grasp, especially when you've been doing it for, I don't even know, like I said, I think I've been doing it since kindergarten at that point, and I was a junior in college. This is my job. This is what I did. I was a student, of course. I had actual jobs in between there as well. But there's something that was so wrapped up of my identity of being an athlete that I felt it was like a badge that was being ripped off of me. That I had a title, and now I didn't know what to replace it with. And I remember sitting on campus. I had all my friends. I had all my teammates still. I kind of I stayed away from the football team for a little while just to kind of process everything, and it was amazing how much just how much everybody was there for me, how much support I received. But I can remember sitting in my dorm and just having nothing to do. It was a rough time. I'd do my homework as if I was still on that athlete schedule because I was very much, hey, do my homework right in the morning or at night, and all of a sudden I had all my day. Right, I didn't know what to do. I didn't have many hobbies. I was no longer balanced. I had nowhere to report to. There was just no job to be had at that point other than my academics, which is super important. But there was a part of me missing. And it was months before I kind of figured it all out and I got back on path and I filled some of that time. I regained some of that courage, right? And I kind of sparked some hobbies or some things that I didn't get to do during all that time. But the most important thing is that I recognized that I'm not the only one who felt like that. I spoke with other people in my shoes that had to stop playing sports due to injury, or that just kind of graduated from college, and that was it. There was nowhere else to go from there with sports. And I realized this is something that's quite universal. I'm not the only one that felt like this. I'm not the only one that felt lost in my journey. I'm not the only one that didn't know what the next chapter held. It was still kind of, trying to read through and figure out where, things kind of veered off in my path. And I realized, you know what, this is the field, this is the area that I need to go follow. I needed to be a voice that was always in the corner of the athlete, that no matter what they were experiencing, whether we're still playing, right, working through performance anxiety, working through stress, right, working through just anything, retirement. There's voices as athletes that needed to be heard. And I think breaking down the stigma as an athlete, that it is okay to talk about it. It's okay to let down that barrier, is something that needs to be learned. And I think we're doing a great job at it, but there's a lot of progress to be made still. Which then, of course, like I just spoke about a little bit about that identity. Many athletes' identity is characterized in what they do, right? You look at some of the professional athletes, of course, that's their job, but you think of them as a football player their whole life, right? For me, I think there was so many people that were like, hey, you're that football player, right? You played from this year to that year. I think I remember you. And, that's great. I think that's awesome that people remember you or think of you that way. But as you're transitioning into this, like my new chapter at that time, there was more to me. I started to realize there's more to Lukas than what my journey was before then, right? There was more to come. There's more me. There's no better thing than living in the present, but I knew there was so much more to come, and there was more to my identity. And like I said, not every athlete will go pro, accepting there is an end to organized sports, right? One day it will end, right? Hopefully, whoever's listening, or if you're a parent or a coach, right, you're kind of, bringing those athletes through their athletic career. There's probably a lot left, hopefully. But not every athlete will go pro. And I think that's, again, goes into that retirement aspect of transitioning out of sports. All right. So I also wanted to discuss performance anxiety. I know I kind of mentioned this a little bit in the last couple slides. Before talking about performance anxiety, I wanted to kind of understand what eustress is first. I think that's important for the listeners to hear here. Eustress is a moderate or normal psychological stress interpreted as being beneficial, right? So there's a couple of examples here. I must study film on the other team to put myself in the best position to succeed, right? I have to study the new plays coach installed so I can play confidently. That's kind of some stress there to, learn to put yourself in an environment where you're studying, right? You feel like you need to get ready and be prepared, right? There's some stress in that, but it's all going to something good, right? Performance anxiety, as defined by the American Psychological Association, is the apprehension and fear of the consequences of being unable to perform a task or performing it at a level that will raise expectations of even being better, of even better task achievement. Sorry. A couple examples of this would be, well, what if I go out for my first varsity game and I blow the game in front of all the fans, right? If I mess up one of these plays, coach is going to kick me off the team. What if I accidentally do well and make them think I'm so good, they promote me to starter, and then they realize I'm a fraud, right? I think this is something definitely I experienced during my time as an athlete, right? What if I go out, right? What if I go out and I all of a sudden, especially when I got to college, I'm this recruit here, right? I'm supposed to be pretty good. Right? What if I go out and I'm just not good, right? What if I got this scholarship and I'm just not meeting expectations, right? All this worry in my head of, I thought of everything going bad, right? So I often make this point of, how much time do we spend thinking about things going right? Right? What if they go so well? Right? Our mind always goes to the place of, well, what if I fail? Right? Even when we think of school, right? What if I fail? If I take this test, and what if I fail it? Right? What if I go out on this field, right, and I pitch my first game and I let up 5 home runs and I lose the game? And, but how many times can we say that we've gone onto that field and thought about the best possible outcome happening? Right? What if we think about that? Right? What if we kind of flip that? Instead of going the negative, we find the positive. Some signs and symptoms of performance anxiety. One is negative self-talk and doubt, an increased focus on failure and shortcomings. And kind of go back to negative self-talk and self-doubt, right? Is kind of going out there and saying what we just said before, right? What if I'm not good enough, right? What if I go in for the first 2 minutes, coach realizes I'm bad and he takes me right out, right? I'm not good enough to beat the person in front of me, right? Then we go on to increased heart rate, right? More physical, sweating, tension, the inability to focus, withdrawn or avoidant from certain situations, strain with teammates, parents, coaches, a lack of confidence, and poor body language. Now, I don't know about whoever's listening, but I can say for myself, I think I've probably felt all of those things before, right? I think it's partially common, right? But it's when it starts to affect your ability to play your sport, where it starts to take away from you mentally, right? So that when you're on there, if you're doing these things, I think the most you could probably be present is maybe 50% of yourself, right? We want to be functioning at least 100%. So these are some things that kind of hinder that. So some strategies to combat performance anxiety in sports. One is breathing techniques. Breathing is very important. I used to focus a lot of this, especially in high school and college, before football games. I used to get myself so worked up and ready. And I don't know if you know anything about football, whoever might be listening, but that pregame takes forever. You go out a couple hours before game, you stretch, you get in, drink a lot of hydration, you're listening to music, you're talking with, your teammates, you're game planning. there's a lot of time, kind of this buildup. It's like this roller coaster effect. And I used to get myself very much, of course, motivated and amped up to go out there, but I needed to calm myself down a little bit. So breathing techniques really helped. And then it goes right into meditation, bringing yourself into a mindset that puts you out there to be confident, right? To gain clarity and go out onto that field, onto that court, and, to be the best version of yourself as an athlete. Positive affirmations, going out and believing, right? Saying statements to yourself that you believe in yourself, right? um, you know, Statements that you would like to see come true. And if you manifest them, right, and say them to yourself, what I like to do some days is, especially on game days, I used to wake up and right in the mirror, I would say some very confident things about myself or to myself, very, complimentary things, and that would be something that really helped me on those days. Mental repetitions, just working through what may be going on that day, imagining yourself playing well, right? Imagining yourself making the right moves, working through plays, right? As a football player, there's so many plays you have to think about them before you go out and do them. Making sure you're in the right position. That kind of takes away a little bit of these the thoughts, the racing thoughts of, hey, what if I'm wrong, right? What if I do this wrong? What if I make that call wrong? Think about it beforehand, gain some clarity. Pre-game rituals, listening to music. I had some really calming music I realized that I needed to listen to. They got me in the right mindset to go onto that field often. I used to also listen to, of course, like rap and hip hop. AC/DC was one of my favorites, but I realized that was maybe good right before the game, but before that I needed something a little bit more calm. So it got me right in the right headspace. And also just find the good in what is being done and what is being said, right? As far as, performance anxiety, I think it's a lot of what others say to us, right? That kind of then instills something in us to think about it, right? Interpret it whatever way anxiety might want us to, right? Sometimes it's blocking out how they say it, but trying to take what the person is saying to you and learning that, right? Not about, if you have a coach that's yelling at you, right? He might be yelling at you what you need to be doing, and he might be saying some things that probably aren't too important right beforehand. But if you block out the noise, right, and you allow in the good part, right, the part that's maybe explaining what could be better, then we learn, right? It's not always me, it's them. It's how people deliver things. It's how coaches deliver things. It's how we deliver things, right? Another thing, there's purpose in your struggle, right? I think the fundamentals of sports is built off of a winner and a loser. There's nothing new to this, though. I think if you look around the world, right, I'm sitting here right next to a light, right? Something as simple as a light. I think it took well over, 50, 100 failed experiments to create the light bulb, right? If somebody had given up at 50, right, at 49, at whatever, we might be sitting here in the dark. Who knows, right? Maybe somebody else would have come along. But repetitive failure followed by relentlessness and eventual is led to eventual success. Flip the narrative on loss, right? There's growth to be had in the dullest moments. Replace the idea of loss with learning. Or I like to say, there's no such, and I think I might be quoting a little bit of Jalen Hurts here. I'm a big Eagles fan. I don't know if there's anybody doesn't like that, but I remember him saying something along the lines of, "It's only a loss if you're not learning from that," right? There's growth to be made, right? I think if we lived in a world where everything we ever did was right? It wouldn't feel too good winning then. If no matter what, we are always winning, right? There's something to be learned in that. I think there's something so special in that. Flip the L of loss and make it learning. When you go back and you lose a game, you don't just roll over and say, well, we're a bad team, we're going to lose every game. No, you watch the film and you learn, you get better so that, hey, you don't make the same mistakes next time, right? It's the same thing with performance anxiety, our struggles as athletes with our mental health, right? We're learning through this, right? It's not always going to be perfect. It's not always going to be pretty, but there's growth to be made here. So I think that's important to remember. For parents and coaches, like a role they serve in combating performance anxiety is do not set unreasonable expectations, right? We'll give some examples as we go along here. I want to get through these points first. Refrain from predetermining outcomes of sporting events. Statements like, you're much bigger and stronger, you'll win, don't worry about it, you'll win. And then you lose, right? And then all of a sudden this really awkward conversation has to happen. Um, so controlling your emotions during sporting events as a coach or a parent, I think so much of your energy does rub off on your child, on the athlete, in any aspect. Being cool, calm, collective, and being confident, right? Given the situation that might be going on in the field court, whatever, it does help spread a little bit of that calmness to the athlete. And still belief. I think one of the most fundamental things as a coach or parent is belief. Do not discuss results immediately after sporting events, right? Give time to yourself and the athlete to reflect on the game and performance. There was nothing I disliked more after a loss than, being greeted by either my parents or whoever and talking immediately about what could have been better. I'm aware probably at that time what could have been better. And I realize there's film to watch and, ways that I know I'm going to turn that loss into a learning lesson and apply it to our next game or next practice. So giving a little bit of time. Again, like I said before, your energy and happiness is important to them. Focus on effort and what was learned and what will need to be learned. It's not always about the outcome, right? If you focus on how hard the athlete is working, right, at getting better, it's not the result. It might not always be what you want it to be. We can't really always control that. So it's good to focus on effort. And your success is not based on the athlete's performance, right? I think sometimes as parents, as a coach, right, we put so much of that and take pride in our kids, and that's something so amazing. But sometimes we take their success as ours, right? And as a parent or coach, it's about being with them and understanding, and it's not always about the result, but rather connecting. All right. So I want to open up this part for questions. You can go ahead and ask them in the Q&A tab if anybody has any. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this and open that tab up now. All right. If anybody has trouble, it looks like on my screen at least, there is a Q&A tab right on the bottom of that Zoom. On the bottom here, it looks like participants chat, Q&A, raise hand. If you hit that Q&A part, there might be a little section you can write a question in. And I'd love to hear any questions anybody might have. And I'll do my best, of course, to give you an answer. I'll give you guys a few minutes on that, okay? All right, I see some rolling in here. We'll start answering them in just a moment. Okay. See a question here. It says, what is the best way to support an athlete that has a toxic coach? So that is something I'm familiar with. I think it's not the easiest thing to come across a coach who is perfect, but there are very much so sometimes toxic coaches out there. There's also very good coaches out there. I think the number one thing as a parent, as an athlete, to a coach is communication, right? You have to communicate, ways that you learn, right, as an athlete or as a parent. Um, you know, just how your child is going to propel in their sport. If a coach is not supporting that or is not getting the best out of their athlete, I think there's a meeting that would probably need to be had, where there's a discussion, right? How do you get through to this athlete, right? Bring out the best in them, let them enjoy the sport, have fun. At the end of the day, it is a sport, right? We do want to have fun with that. But you would hope as your coach, right, you'd want to, as a coach, you'd want to pull out the best of your athlete. And sometimes difficult conversations and communication need to happen. At the end, the goal would be there's open communication, right? There's an understanding of the athlete, how they learn, right? How they need to be talked to or approached with different things. But I think, communication is key, right? We have this wonderful language and ability to speak. And the best way we can get to those answers is by being open and honest. I'm looking to see if there's any other questions that are coming through here. Do I think a parent should confront a toxic coach? I don't want to use the word confrontation. I don't think anything should be a confrontation with a coach. I think coaches are and parents and an athlete are supposed to communicate together, right? I think it doesn't always have to be a confrontation, but rather an open discussion. So it's important that you are able to go to your coach, or you're able to go to your parent, or you're able to go to the athlete with these questions. You should be able to feel comfortable in doing so. So I wouldn't want to call it a confrontation, but rather going to them and having a conversation about what could be better, right? How can we can approach this to, better this situation, and how the athlete, the coach, or the parent might be feeling. I'm just going to give it another minute here to see if we have any questions that come through. Okay. A question come through said, "What would you recommend parents to do if their son or daughter wants to quit their sport?" Um, I would urge to take it slowly, right? If there's any pressing concerns, right, where it needs to be an urgent situation where they do need to be pulled from the sport, of course. But talk about it, right? Communication, what is going on in that sport, right? It's not always about the sport they don't like, but maybe it's the atmosphere of the team. They don't feel heard, or it's just not the right environment for them. I would say don't be afraid to sit down and write a pros and cons list of leaving maybe that team or sport. But communicating, right? Sometimes it's due to, like I said, the scheduling needs, and the time management becomes a little bit too stressful with schoolwork and with social life. I would say you need to boil it down to the reason of why they are thinking about quitting their sport, right? Um, and their enjoyment, and understanding their enjoyment levels in it. Is it something that they want to continue and then pursue in the future? Have they talked about that in the past? Does it seem like something that is out of the blue? There's a lot of questions to ask in those scenarios. But I think communication, boiling it down to why, right? Why, when, and what are the reasons? And not also, and just to add to that, um, ask open-ended questions, right? Allow yourself to serve as an ear, right? Ask those questions, just hear what they have to say. I think a lot of the times when you do that, your child will give hints or tell you why they are thinking that way. I think I see a couple more coming in. Okay. How can I support my athlete that has performance anxiety? I think the best place to start would be therapy, right? Discussing their openness um, to maybe starting therapy, at least having a consultation, discussing, um, you know, of course, discussing what their desire is, understanding what their needs are, and just their openness to starting something like individual therapy to discuss, their symptoms and whatnot. I think would be probably the first approach. But of course, just again, as a parent, serving, offering an ear, right, to hear and listen. If you do that and you allow your child to gain that trust, they're going to open up a little bit more to you, and express what they're feeling. With that, I think the best support you can do is giving your support, but also then finding them additional support. Like I said, a therapist would probably be the route I would suggest, of course. Have you seen a difference between male and female athletes and the way they respond to stresses of their sports? Um, I'll respond to that question. I'm gonna add a little bit to that question and answer a little bit differently as well. There is a difference in how males and female athletes do respond. Stress looks a lot of different for males and females. Females can also turn into eating disorders, things of that sort. Um, Males, they become a little bit more aggressive or become a little bit more irritable, and it kind of manifests a little bit differently that way. I also wanted to add that individual sports tend to have a little bit more of an effect in increasing performance anxiety in the athlete. So things like maybe you play like an individual sport like tennis, maybe there's bowling, sports of that such. There's actually an increase in performance anxiety in those sports as well. We'll have a couple more rolling in, it seems, here. What do you think leads to performance anxiety in sports? There's a lot of different things that could play a part in leading to performance anxiety. It can come from within, from outside forces, like parents, coaches, a little bit of what I discussed in the presentation. There's a lot of different things that could play a part. I think setting unreasonable expectations, a desire to be perfect, right? That doing it yourself mindset plays a part in creating that performance anxiety, right? When you set that bar very high on yourself, the ability to succeed is not always the success rate of doing so is not very high. What I often say is set the bar at a little bit lower expectation where it's reasonable, right? A standard. And in doing so, you create a little bit more of a success rate. But when you set that bar too high, like I said, when you finally do achieve it, right, what's that next level, right? So it keeps you going for more. Um, So I would say, it's a little bit of everything I discussed a little bit earlier. I think there's a variety of reasons that performance anxiety does start. Um, but those are just some. Setting that bar a little bit too high, too often, too early, as well. All right, I'll give just another few seconds here if there's any additional questions. In the meantime, of course, again, my name is Lukas DeCandido. I am a therapist here at MedPsych Associates. I do have availability myself, of course, if you ever wanted to pass along my contact. I hope a lot of you enjoyed today's webinar. Like I said, this is something very near and dear to my heart. This is something I've been super passionate about. I remember, posting after I graduated from graduate school, and I just remember saying, like, to athletes, you're always going to have somebody in your corner now, and there's a voice. It's hard to kind of break down that barrier and work through that, but there's a light ahead in that tunnel. There's a lot, positive things to come, and I just want the athlete to be heard. I think it's something we kind of stray away from, and um, something we're taught to at a young age as athletes. Put your head down and go to work, and that's something that over time it builds up into, like I said, performance anxiety, things like that. And I just, of course, I want the athlete voice to be heard. All right, that seems to be the end of the questions. I just want to thank everybody again for joining today's webinar. You could always find my contact on the MedPsych page, of course, medpsychealth.com, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the practice. We also have future webinars that will be coming up in the near future. We have to cover a wide variety of topics. I think what I love so much about MedPsych is that everybody kind of has their passion, and it's been such an enjoying thing to watch my colleagues present about all their passions. And I think that's what makes it so unique here. I get a little bit excited when I talk about our staff here. I just really appreciate everybody. All right, then we are going to wrap it up. Like I said, thanks everybody for coming. And again, if you need to contact me for any reason, you can do so through our website. Topic to myself, and since you're here, it's clearly has some importance to you as well. So we're going to discuss, athletes and mental health. Of course, there's going to be a portion to answer questions at the end. There's going to be a lot of information